Welcome to this presentation on creating an effective academic poster. My name is Dr. Jason Lee from the Office of Education at Duke NUS Medical School. Whether this is your first conference or your 10th, there are always refinements that you can make. The difference between a poster that someone walked past and one that draws them in and starts a conversation. We walk through the principles, look at some real examples, and give you practical checklists to use before you submit your file for printing. So let us start with the most important question. Why does your poster matter? The first thing to understand is the time constraint. Research consistently shows that conference attendees spend fewer than 3 minutes at a single poster. That's not 3 minutes of focused reading. That includes the time they spend deciding whether to stop at all. Your poster has to earn that attention. The second point is about purpose. A poster is not a paper on a wall, and it is not a place to present every piece of data you have collected. Its primary function is to start a conversation. The real intellectual exchange happens between you and the person standing in front of your poster, not the poster itself. And third, design creates lasting impression. A well-designed poster signals that you have taken your work seriously. Conversely, a cluttered or hard-to-read poster, regardless of how good the underlying research is, signals the lack of attention to detail. First impression matters. Before you design a single element, think about who will be walking past your poster. At a conference, your audience includes clinicians and educators who have packed schedules and limited time. It includes researchers and educators from adjacent fields who may not be familiar with your specific methodology. It includes colleagues looking for collaboration, opportunities, and inspiration. And it includes international delegates for whom English may not be their first language. So given this diversity, what do they all need from your poster? They need to see your key findings within 10 seconds. It should be visible from 2 meters away. And within 30 seconds, they should decide why it matters enough. And there should be enough details, methodological details, which will allow them to assess the quality, but it also should be summarized and not transcribed. And finally, your poster should leave them with one unanswered question, something that makes them want to come back and talk to you. So now let us talk about the physical space you're working with. So most posters are in A0, which is about 84 cm by 1.2 meters, and that's a large canvas. So the standard approach is either a 2 or 3 column layout. The equal column creates a natural reading path and allows visual breadth room between your sections. Readers can follow the content from top to bottom in each column, then move on to the next. Margin matters more than most people think. A minimum of 25 millimeters on all sides is recommended, and text should not run too close to the edge, or it looks too rushed and difficult to read, particularly in bright conference hall lighting. So your reading flow should be deliberate. Design from left to right, top to bottom, and readers should not have to guess where to look next. Use consistently labeled section headers, and many attendees will scan the headers first to decide if the poster is relevant for them before committing on the content. And finally, embrace the white space. A common mistake is to fill every available centimeter, and white space is not wasted space. It reduces cognitive load and actually draws the eye to what matters. Aim roughly 30% of white spaces across your poster. Most academic posters follow an IMRAD structure: introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. For education research, we adapt this slightly, and let me walk through each section. The introduction should state the education problem or gap that you're addressing. Start with the problem, not with the background. 1 or 2 sentences maximum, and do not over-explain. The objective section should contain a single, clear research question or aim. The more focused it is, the more credible it reads. If your research question is concise enough, paste it in verbatim. For the methods section, list the design, setting, participants in 3 bullets. Name your instruments and do not describe them in full. State your analysis approach in 1 sentence. What you should do is to summarize and not transcribe. Now, results deserve the most real estate on your poster. Lead with your most important finding. Use a figure rather than table, rather than paragraphs. Report effect sizes or thematic categories, and not just the p-values. And for the conclusion, state what educators or researchers should do differently as a result of your work. One practical implication: acknowledge any limitations that you have in one brief line, and make the so what unmistakably explicit. So a specific note for education research that you're doing is that if your study uses qualitative or design-based method, label your methodology clearly. A brief one-line definition can prevent misunderstanding among audience members who are more familiar with clinical research findings. So the most common mistake in academic posters that I observe is too much text. Research on poster design recommends that keeping your total body of text below 500 words. That is across the entire poster, excluding title, authors, and references. That is less than most method sections alone. So let us see what you should do in a poster. Use bullet points rather than paragraphs. Write in an active voice. We found, we observe. Use sentence fragments where the meaning is clear. Summarize your methods and not transcribe them. Let your visuals carry the results with text only to annotate. Now, what should you not do then? Do not paste text from your abstract or paper. Do not write in full sentences where bullets will just do. Do not include exclusion criteria, sub-analysis, and do not try to use too much jargon, without one-line definition. And do not repeat the same information in both text and figure. If the figure shows it, you do not need to say it again in words. Let us briefly look at typography and color, which are often underestimated. On the left is a font size guide for A0 format. So your poster title should be at least 72 points, which is readable from at least 3 to 5 meters away. Section headers at 36, body text at 28, captions at 18, references at 14. So these are just minimum sizes, and in doubt, go larger. On the right are 5 color principles. Limit yourself to 2 to 3 colors, 1 primary, 1 accent, and 1 neutral. On a useful rule of thumb from a design is the 60-30-10 rule. 60% of your visual space is in the dominant color, 30% in the secondary, and 10% as an accent. Always use strong contrast, dark text on light background or white text on dark background. Never use gray text on white background. It consistently fails on readability standard. Check color blindness for accessibility where possible. And remember, use your institution's official color palette. It signals professionalism and ensures your poster is immediately identifiable as coming from your organization. So branding and compliance are often easy to overlook and rushed in finalized content, but they matter. So depending on your conference organizers, you may or may not be provided with a template. In this example, I will assume that you do not have a branding template provided by your organizer. Place your institutional logos in the header zone of your poster. Always use the official logo files. Never stretch your logos, and never use an informal or outdated version. Your author affiliation must match your abstract submission exactly. Corrections after printing are expensive and sometimes not possible. So if you plan to include a QR code, which I strongly recommend you do, link it to your full paper and supplementary data, or even your research profile. Remember to test it before you send the file to print and scan it on multiple devices. And check whether your institution or grant conditions require an acknowledgement or funding disclosure. These are often mandatory, and omitting them can create compliance issue. Now let us look at some examples. The first example is a simplified poster I created. Now look at the title. It is concise, it contains the study design, and it states the key findings. This is exactly what a good poster title should do. The layout follows a 2 to 3 column structure. So the background and objectives is in the first column, methods in the second, and conclusion in the third. The results are shown in a bar chart and not buried in a paragraph. You can see at a glance that the TBL group maintained higher scores at both 2 weeks and 3 months. The conclusion states the practical implication explicitly. TBL should be considered as the default format for foundational science teaching. And a QR code provides full text access. And the limitation is also acknowledged in a single line. So this column callouts on the right, mark each element that makes this as effective design. So here's a poster that from a previous conference that I attended. So notice the concise information title that describes both the study design and who the participants are. The 2 columns layout create a logical flow, and the study design is clearly stated in the methods section. The results are supported by both chart and summary table. So it gives readers an option. You can look at the visual chart first and then check the numbers. So the conclusions state a practical implication. And references and acknowledgements are included in the footer. This is a clean professional poster that respects the reader's time. Here's a real example. The title again clearly defines the purpose and participants group. The 2-column layout flows logically. What stands out is the introduction section. It provides just enough context to orient the reader without over-explaining. The research methods are represented visually, which is particularly effective for studies with a multi-stage design. The key takeaways are presented clearly, and the overall text is well controlled, concise, without being superficial. Now, the counterexample. This is deliberately created as a poor version of the same study that you saw earlier. Now look at the title. It runs more than 40 words. By the time a reader has finished the title, they would have already lost interest. The background section is dense, paragraphs with no bullets, no hierarchy, and no white space. The method section is fully transcribed. It reads more like a journal article, not a poster. The results are buried in a paragraph in the results and discussion section. There are no figures, no charts, no visual representation of the data anywhere in this poster. There's no separate conclusion section. The reader would have to infer what practical implications is from the final sentence of the discussion. Every one of these is a fixable mixtape. None of them require more data or more analysis. They require editing, restructuring, and redesign. So here's another example with some design problems. So there is also no clear reason why it's a 3-column layout. So the reader cannot tell why the information is organized in the way it is. So the text is also extremely dense, presenting a research paper in a poster format. So the tables, if you look on your right, is also quite difficult to follow at a poster reading distance. So results are also described rather than visualized. So there are no figures, maybe one figure on the bottom left, but mostly text rather than visualized. So and also one practical point. Notice the physical state of the poster. It's been crumpled. During travel, it's been crumpled. So always transport your poster in a poster tube like you see here. So damaged poster regardless of how good the content is, makes a poor impression. So here's an example to show, when the layout decisions are not made consistently from the start. So the poster shifts between 2, 1, and 3 columns across the different sections. It creates a disjoint reading experience, and for the reader, it doesn't have a clear starting or endpoint or clear path to follow. The other problem is that there is no consistent heading sections. So the color palette is also quite cluttered with too many competing colors and visual distractors. There are also no results or conclusion that is delineated from here. So this is a case where The content itself is, solid, but the design prevents readers from accessing it quickly and easily. And here's a final cautionary example. So this is not really a poster, but essentially a presentation slide printed in an A0 poster format. And it's quite a surprisingly common mistake where people come to conferences with their slides and only realizing that they are supposed to have it as a poster presentation. And presentation slides are never meant to be projected, in a dark. It's meant to be projected in a dark room rather than narrated by a speaker. So it's not designed to be read at a distance or a poster stand. So apart from that, the slides also have actually quite a lot of text. The font size is not proper when you scale it up, and reading it in a portrait orientation is also very difficult. So if you're designing for a poster, always start, using a poster template or with a poster in mind. So now let us consolidate some of the most common mistakes and their fixes here. So the first is too much text. Please rewrite the entire section from scratch at 20 to 30% of the original word count. The second one is visual. Convert at least one finding to a figure. Use tables only when direct numerical comparison is the point. The third is low resolution image. Try to use images that are provided by your corporate comms office or images that when print meet the 300 dpi requirement. And export your statistical figures as vector files in PDF or PNG format when possible. The unclear so what? End your conclusions with a statement that begins with, this means that educators should. Make the takeaway explicit and not implied. The next is the formatting inconsistency. Try to use a grid layout, apply styles consistently and align everything in your poster. And finally, a buried key finding. So your main results should be visible in the title or at minimum prominent in the callout box in the results section. If someone can read your poster title and know what you found, you have succeeded.
917.
So your poster is only half the equation. The other half is what happens when someone stops. Prepare a 90-second verbal pitch. Know your one-line summary of the research question. Be able to state your key findings clearly and simply. End with what you think this means for practice. Practice it until it feels naturally rather than scripted. The next is position yourself clearly. Stand beside your poster, not in front of it. Make eye contact with people as they approach. Offer to walk them through the key findings, and if someone wants to read independently, step aside and let them. And finally, have something for your readers to take away with them. So a QR code linking to your paper, business card, your ID research profile, or any optional one-page handout. So any follow-up meaningful connection within 48 hours when the conversation is still fresh in everyone's mind. And here's a checklist that you can take a screenshot of that I think might be useful as a pre-submission checklist before printing your poster. So these are just general guidelines that you can consider for your next poster presentation, and it's not a requirement for all posters. So to close, 5 key takeaways to carry with you. Number 1, your poster is a conversation starter. Design it to attract and not to inform too much. The second one, keep your word count under 500. Every sentence that you have should earn its place within your poster. So the third is always try to visualize. One clear figure is worth a full text of a full page of text. And the fourth, so try to make practical implication, explicit within your conclusion. And finally, always prepare. Try to prepare a 90-second pitch so that when someone approaches you, you're always ready. So I hope this presentation has been useful. And if you have any question about your poster, feel free to reach out to your conference organizers. And good luck with your presentation. So I look forward to seeing you at a future conference. So thank you very much.